My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel, and all the king's horses and all the king's men could not prevent the Caldor Fire from escaping Division Juliet again and is heading up the Highway 50 corridor and threatening South Lake Tahoe this morning, Monday, the 30th of August. Stand by for an update. The Caldor Fire here in Northern California is now the highest priority fire in Northern California. Let me give you a quick overview of what else is going on around the state. These fires here to the west of Redding in the Coast Range, McFarland, Monument, Knob, and others, those fires are just going to be allowed to just let burn. There's not a whole lot of resources available to do a lot with these fires, as they are mostly in wilderness territory and not a lot of structures threatened over there. On the Dixie Fire, the Dixie Fire is 765,000 acres and 48% contained. So some things are beginning to slow down a bit on the Dixie Fire, and CAL FIRE and the Forest Service are able to strip crews from the Dixie Fire and apply them down to the Caldor Fire. There is a bit of activity on the Dixie Fire and air tanker activity on this section of the fire just to the west of Lake Davis. Here on the Caldor Fire, while we were gone on our trip up into Oregon, thanks for watching, by the way, the winds were relatively light, and the Caldor Fire was growing at a rate of about a half a mile per day up the Highway 50 corridor. But just as we suspected, once this fire got into the Highway 50 corridor and the winds began to pick up yesterday, this fire overpowered Division Juliet and pushed further to the east, and now is currently all the way up to nearly Echo Summit, the top of the Sierra Nevada mountain range right here locally. This is known as alignment in the firefighting business. When you got the topography, the temperature, and the winds all aligned, then this fire can make a hard drive to the east. And it's this current hard drive that's driving mandatory evacuations throughout South Lake Tahoe. So what's driving this event? Looking at the surface map, looks pretty benign, but if you go up to the jet stream at about 36,000 feet, you can see a pretty strong zonal jet stream across the upper part of the United States, and that's dragging a pretty good westerly flow when you come back down to towards the surface. Here at 9,000 feet, it's pulling a pretty good westerly flow over the top of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And our local weather forecasters are forecasting winds as high as 10, 15, or 20 miles an hour over the peaks of the Sierra Nevada mountains in the vicinity of the Caldor Fire today and tomorrow. Looking at windy.com, early in the morning, you see the downsloping winds. Well, this fire was so active overnight, there's so little humidity recovery overnight that this fire continued to burn very actively, as you saw in that clip on the introduction. And so that's going to create its own wind event. The fire is going to create its own wind event and bypass, if you will, the downsloping winds and just continue to draw up the chimney of the American River Canyon. And as we move in through the day, you can see the winds begin. Now, Windy is forecasting a little bit less wind than what the local forecasters are forecasting, and hopefully that's the case. And then the winds again will die off later on in the afternoon. And then tomorrow, same scenario, even a little more wind on Tuesday. And of course, as that wind slopes up the Sierra, just like an airfoil on a wing, as it gets over towards the top, it's going to increase in velocity as it gets compressed over the top of the mountains, giving firefighters even a bigger fight on their hands. Over here on Windfinder, they're more in agreement with the local forecast showing 16-mile-an-hour sustained winds. Of course, there'll be gusts in excess of this in the area of the Caldor Fire. This is at 2 p.m. predicted today. And let's look at tomorrow, even more, 18 miles an hour. So as a result of these winds and our current conditions here in Northern California, CAL FIRE has issued a red flag warning throughout much of the state, northern part of Northern California here in southern Oregon. And what's a red flag warning? A red flag warning is issued for weather events which may result in extreme fire behavior that will occur within 24 hours. The type of weather patterns that can cause a watch or warning include low relative humidity, strong winds, dry fuels, the possibility of dry lightning strikes. They're not expecting any lightning on this. This is just a wind-driven warning, or any combination of the above. During heightened fire danger, CAL FIRE will place additional firefighters on duty, staff more engines, and keep more equipment on 24 hours a day and able to respond. Well, they're already kind of maxed out right now. A red flag warning is the highest alert. During these times, extreme caution is urged by all residents because a simple spark can cause a major wildfire. Wow, now look at this. As a result of all this, the El Dorado County Sheriff has increased the mandatory evacuation warnings shown in orange to include nearly all of South Lake Tahoe. The rest of this little chunk of South Lake Tahoe is a evacuation warning shown in yellow. So mandatory evacuations for much of South Lake Tahoe all the way up to Tahoe. Heed those warnings. Now to try and get an idea of where the active fire actually is right now. The Caldor Fire outline shown in yellow, and then the satellite heat signatures from Modus and Vers shown in red and yellow dots. This, of course, is the main concern right up here, up the Highway 50 corridor, and it's showing, wow, this is moving fast. It's showing heat all the way up to Echo Summit. So that makes the second fire in California history that I know of just this year, the Dixie Fire and now the Caldor Fire, the first two fires that I know of that have started somewhere in the foothills and have gone all the way up to the crest of the Sierra Nevada mountains and crossing over the Sierra Nevada mountain range in one single fire. I don't remember any other fires in California history doing this. So what's threatened down here, this is where this fire gets back into a lot of wildland-urban interface. In other words, structures, homes are potentially going to get lost here. Turning on the structures here on the CalTopo map, all these little dots in yellow are individual houses that are evacuated and are in harm's way. Now, as you can see, this drops off precipitously from the top of Echo Summit. It drops down 1,000 or 2,000 feet down to this Christmas Valley location below. And all it takes with this wind-driven event, even though there's a lot of granite up here at the summit to potentially slow this fire down, it's going to be a spot fire situation, and that's how the fire gets away or slops over these fire lines. How it got away from Division Juliet is the spotting of the fire over containment lines. Let me show you an example. Stand by one. During our local river fire event here a couple weeks ago that was 5 to 6 miles away from here, whole leaves and some small branches and even magazine pages were floating down from the clouds and landing on my back deck. And this is how these fires spot. Now, 5 or 6 miles away, fortunately, these embers were dead out. But look at this leaf. It was green. It's kind of fire frozen. You'll see as you go through a fire area, it literally freezes the vegetation. And in this case, just rips it up into the column and sends it miles and miles away. Fortunately for us here on Banner Mountain, these were dead out. But when you're within a mile or two of the fire, these embers are still hot, and that's how the spot fires get going. We also have a lot of heat and a lot of firefight going on here along Highway 88. They're hoping to make Highway 88 a containment line and stop this advance along that highway. But if this gets over and into the South Lake Tahoe area, hard telling what it's going to do. Is it going to turn to the north and blast right into all these structures and homes up here? Or are we going to get it to skip over these homes, or maybe quickly through them, and then into this terrain up over here, which is pretty heavily timbered just to the east, which is the overall direction that the fires have been tracking. Now, regarding the structure protection along Highway 50, and what firefighters have been able to do is, well, first off, this fire, it gets too big and it's too active to fight directly. All they can kind of do is corral it from the sides of the flanks of the fire. Once it gets too active, all they can do is escape and evacuate people, get folks out of harm's way. They can do some structure defense, and what they can typically do is take and cut a line around a structure or a series of structures that they want to try to save, maybe even a bulldozer line around it. And then if the winds aren't too strong, they'll actually light a fire outside of that ring and try to burn away some of that vegetation around the structure in an effort to minimize the bumping or the hit of the fire as it comes into that area. But as these winds pick up today and tomorrow, that burnout operation will be stopped, and all they can do is draw that containment line down to bare earth around that structure and hope for the best. Hopefully they can get this fire to move through here quickly, minimize the damage to all these structures, and if they're lucky, get it up and moving again away from the populated areas. What's going to remain to be seen is how will this fire track to the north. Now, if you know the local area, we're all thinking, well, heck, there's a hell of a lot of granite in here that should stop the fire. This is the Desolation Wilderness area, which is all mandatory evacuation, and it's all primarily granite. But down here in the 50 corridor, there's still plenty of vegetation to run that fire up and then over. And then you get into these houses, and it looks like, well, the vegetation's is less dense, if you will. But if you get down here and look at street level in these neighborhoods, there's still plenty of fuel to burn. And here's, looking back to the west, how steep that terrain is coming down from Highway 50. And all it's going to take is a few embers flying off of this ridge down into this subdivision to get this fire to continue to move along. And we're looking at the Armstrong Lookout 12-hour look back, just how active that fire was burning last night. Of course, this lookout is located west of the fire, looking to the east, back towards South Lake Tahoe. And here's what it looks like at the Armstrong Lookout Tower the last 3 hours this morning. This is going to form a large pyrocumulus cloud by this afternoon. And that's the active fire in the Highway 50 Echo Summit area as viewed from the west. Looking at the Zoom Earth satellite view here in Northern California, up here is the Dixie Fire, and here's the Caldor Fire. This is starting August 29th at 9 in the morning. And by 2 or 3 in the afternoon, we've got a pretty good pyrocumulus cloud coming off of the Caldor Fire. Now moving on to this morning and to present. Again, the Dixie Fire up here. We've got some clear air overhead, the Blanco Lirio Global Headquarters currently. And here's the Dixie Fire down here. And that is the current view. One other real important layer I want to look at on the CalTopo map is fire history. You see this area in here, this unburned, relatively unburned part of the Caldor Fire. Well, that's because this is the Caples fire burn from 2019. This started out, I believe the Caples fire started out as a fuels reduction fire and ended up becoming a bit more of a wildfire than they wanted to. But as a result, you don't see a lot of active fire in the recently burned Caples fire area. Same thing up here on the Dixie fire. They're running into the 2019 Walker fire. Not a lot of activity there. And it looks like air tanker activity is hitting this section of the Dixie fire down here by Lake Davis. And here's the part of the North Complex in the Feather River Canyon from all of last year. So for air tanker activity up on the Dixie Fire, I know the MAFs have been operating all day long over the headquarters here, heading up to the Dixie Fire. Looks like they're going again this morning with the air attack working just outside of the Lake Davis area. Tanker 131 inbound, Colson C-130. By the way, all 8 MAFs have been activated from the Garden Reserve. So the entire fleet of MAFs aircraft in the United States inventory is activated up and flying. Let's see what's going on down here on the Caldor Fire. We've got a air attack 690 Romeo Alpha sussing things up right now. We got air attack 505, the lead Bronco. The Bronco for Cal Fire that can operate as a lead aircraft, sizing things up, and it looks like they're looking at possibly working on the Highway 88 section of the fire. Again, because of the winds and the conditions, there's very little firefighters, even air tankers, can do at the head of the fire. It's simply too unsafe to attack the head of the fire. All they can do is try to corral the fire up the flanks of it where there's good enough air and visibility to safely operate. And in another firefighting first, 3 Colson helicopters that can operate at night. For the first time, we're doing night operations over a fire with 3 specially equipped Colson helicopters. Looks like a couple of Chinooks and maybe a Black Hawk helicopter. But these guys have been able to drop water at night, I assume using night vision goggles. If you have a good link or some intel about how they're doing this operation, I'd be very interested to see how this is being done. So the air attacks, the Broncos from Cal Fire, are stuck. They don't come home now until after dark as they're overhead the fire, getting these 3 helicopters squared away as to what part of the fire to work for the evening before the last Bronco OV-10 can come home for the night. So I hope that gives you a better understanding of what's going on with the Caldor Fire today, Monday the 30th of August. Thanks so much for your support of this channel, especially over on Patreon that makes this content possible. See you here. I'm planning on doing another update tomorrow morning to see how this played out. See you then.